Journos, I'm Peter Martin. Hugh McDonald and Alison McConnell are with me here in the studio. If you hit the subscribe button, you can join the football family. And remember, there's so much content to download on the app. And interestingly enough, Ali and I were talking about it. If you download the app and you go into our main menu, right down at the bottom there, it says contact. And if you go into contact, you can record a message and it will drop into us. And if you want to see yourself on the programmes, you can record a message and just basically give us your thoughts on your favourite team or anything else that is bugging you in Scottish, European, world football.
I can just do that and not come drive all the way from Stirling.
It would be fantastic. The only problem with that, Hugh, is it would deny me the chance to have an argument with you.
Yeah, get your baseball. You wouldn't need a baseball bat.
I'd miss you. It's hard to believe, Ali, but Hugh, 12 years with the PLZ team.
Testimonial.
Well, he is due it, by the way. There's so many people wanting to line up for the Tribute Act. It's going to be fantastic. Anyway, great to have Hugh here with us. Great to have Ali. You've been here a while as well. Ali, I think 4 or 5 years?
Pre-COVID anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And the great thing about it is we like your observations, your criticisms, your praise in equal measure, because we all know on social media you like to offer your opinions. So there's lots of stuff on the programme today that I think you're going to enjoy, not only if you're watching it on our YouTube channel, but on the podcast if you're listening. So thank you very much for your support. So, John McGarry in the Daily Mail. I think you mentioned also Graham McGarry may
the Herald,
yeah.
I think there's a few. Yeah.
Basically on young players being given a chance to actually be played on a regular basis, to get as many minutes as possible. And Scotland's not faring too well. It was a great piece by John because it had a lot of stats on young people.
Minutes.
And the minutes that players play. And up until February of last season, the main crux of the piece is that under the age of 20 in Scotland, 6,947 minutes of action for young players. If you compare that to the likes of Denmark, which is 15,730, the Netherlands, 19,752, even La Liga, Hugh, 13,020 minutes for young players. They're getting the opportunity to play first-team football. We have, just to try and put this in context, we have a number of excuses or legitimate reasons, we'll debate it today, where somebody would say if you put youngsters in, they have a detrimental effect on the team. The 12-team league doesn't lend itself to it, and managers have said our own job security is at risk if we play, too many, or we're under pressure to play them.
Yep, it's. I thought it was a fascinating. I read John's article closely. The SFA, by the way, for anybody that's got a couple of hours to spare today, has put out the full report. And I'm one of these guys that will read the full report of this. It's out now. It's on their website. You can read the full book because it's challenged my thinking. A lot of things that I held to be completely true. This article and these stats are saying are not true. So I have to investigate that because, you say to yourself, well, you could be very well be, according to this, you're wrong. Why are you wrong?
Yeah.
And they're very strong on the overall. I haven't got into the sort of nuts and bolts of the stats yet, but they're really strong on things that I held to be truths, like fear of playing kids. Pathway, not trusting kids because they might not be good enough, etc., etc. And they're really striking at these foundations strongly, and they're obviously got evidence.
Yeah, the 3 points that I made is what some people would be using as an excuse.
The averages.
All of these are unfounded from this report.
Yep.
And Ali, when you look at it, over the last 4 years, it says 407 players have played in the top 5 leagues across Europe before turning 18. And you only have to look at Lamal at Spain to see that, this boy's come on, he's 16 years of age. And
he's an exceptional talent. I mean, Lamal is maybe slightly different because you're talking about a generational talent, but I think in a wider context, I think the figures make for pretty grim reading. I think we would all have known that it was poor, that the return was poor for young players coming in, but I think when you see it laid down starkly in black and white, and in a comparison with very prestigious leagues.
Aye.
Yes.
La Liga stats incredible, isn't it?
Well, La Liga stats, even the Netherlands are a very competitive league too. When you see the comparison, and England too, you know, you think of the riches and the money and how the pressure that managers are under down south, because if they go out of that league financially, it can be ruinous. Even though you have the parachute payments and stuff, it's such a vast drop. So I think there's ample food for thought. What you would think it should be given rise to now is a strategy. What you need now is to almost encompass it in the laws of the game and the laws of the league, to say we're going to force you to play so many young players. Now, it's been tried before when you had to have so many players under 21 or so many homegrown players within your squad, but I think there has to be a commitment to trying to bring youngsters in.
Well, strangely enough, and again, it's not a topic that you could deal with simply and say, here are the definitive answers on it, because as I always mention with these situations, you have a layer and then another layer of questions and problems that you have to address. One of them is, some people say, well, they cherry pick the best players and take them down to England. So are we producing enough? Is the coaching right that gives us enough of a pool to say, well, okay, there might be the really good ones that are going down to England, but we must give the next layer a chance to play regular football. They're talking obviously about the situation where they're going to address this strategy, where maybe the clubs will embrace that you can, in the Championship and the Premiership, loan players domestically if they need to be back to follow UEFA rules of having young players in that squad or on the bench. Then they can go back to the club and sit on the bench, and then they can go back to playing domestic football wherever they are. They just can't play in the same division.
Yep.
But you can loan them out and give them regular football.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about this report, and again, I've read the press coverage of it, I haven't read the whole report, but I will, is the two things they're trying to come up with solutions. I think it's great that they've identified problems, and I think it's great where they've said, you know, that my thinking and the thinking of others is actually unfounded. That's always welcome when you see stats to challenge your thinking, I think. But even better, they've come up with solutions. They come up with what they think is the solution. The two things is this kind of, for what a better word, this loan system, which I think I'd have to go into detail of that and see how it is, but I think that's a possibility. The one that could be a game changer is this scholarship thing they've come up with, Peter.
Yeah, for 16-year-olds.
That they're actually tied to a club. Now that takes you back to the old pre-Bosman days in many ways. But that would be very important, because you see, I mean, part of the problem with Scottish football, not all the problem with Scottish football, part of the problem with Scottish football is that young talents coming through do get a game, but then they're picked off. I mean, Taylor's away from Celtic. He got opportunities. Doak played in against Rangers, for goodness sake. What age was he? 16. So he was getting his opportunities.
Yeah.
And he's off. And I'm not blaming him, by the way, because that is capitalism, that is football. But that is also an area, and this scholarship thing would address that.
Yeah, but the research suggests also, you mentioned about, you know, the problem that we have losing players. The research from this document suggests that, you know, a lot of young players who leave early, it doesn't guarantee the success.
Well, it can.
You know, and that percentage is not high, Ali. You're not suddenly getting, oh, well, these are the elite, they're cherry-picked and they're away, and it works out for them. You know, the percentage of players that it doesn't work for is high.
It's huge. You know, it's almost a blip if they do go on and establish themselves at first team level. However, or to speak realistically, it's very hard to combat that, because if you're faced with a financial offer that sets you up for the rest of your life, whether you make it or whether you don't, very few people are going to turn it down. And also, there's a financial element and there's a belief element that these kids that are coming through, if someone says, you know, Everton have come in for you or Man City have come in for you, whoever it is, you're going to back yourself to go down and play. You're going to think, I'm definitely going to go, I can make it. Whatever you think is an outsider and what your perception may be, or however slim the chances are, for an individual, you would think, I can, I will, I can. And also there's this fantastic financial package to lure you away. So it's very, very difficult, I think, to come up with something that would counteract that in the long term.
Yeah, and the other aspect of it as well, Hugh, is, and I think some people have to take it in the neck over the last 4 or 5 generations where we have got things wrong, is quite simply, you know, we had 2 think tanks in the last 30 years, and of those think tanks, have we addressed the ability, yes, you know, technically, to develop the players the right way, and over and above that, give them the chance to get that regular football they crave. And how many have we produced in each club that you can say it's been a worthwhile adventure or you know, structure of putting an academy in place? A lot of managers have looked up and said, you know, these kids, they're in the academy, they said they're signed, and they end up, you know, I mean, Paul Hartley got it in the neck at Falkirk. He dismantled the academy. It might not have been solely his decision. It might have been elsewhere in the structure. But suddenly you lose the academy, you lose the chance of a potential pathway to it. And is it worthwhile? Are we producing enough of them?
I think there must be questions amongst any and every academy, particularly with the financial model now in Scotland, to see, you know, they'll be sitting down and say, what are we doing here? You know, what are we doing? We're spending X amount of money a year. The money, and I know people say the money in terms of, you know, signing a player for 7 or 8 million and playing them 30 grand a week is minimal, but we're spending money. And I say, well, what is our strategy? Is our strategy bring through players? Well, yeah, but when we do, and we've got a few good ones, they leave. They leave, you know, the ones that we get. You've seen Celtic this season, for example, just using Celtic as an example, over the last 18 months have lost Doak, Kelly and Vata. Right? And there'll be others, lost Morrison, of course, to Bayern Munich. That'd be a wee bit longer ago. So they've lost. And every club in Scotland will tell you the story that, you know, their shining light has gone as well. So
and it's before they've made any kind of first team impact. It's before they've even...
No financial compensation of any. I mean, Celtic are now talking about Kelly. I think they're talking about
400 grand.
400 grand or something. But, you know, somebody was saying, like, what are we doing here? You know, what is the whole strategy here? What's the mindset here? What is the aims here? And I know it's difficult now to get kids in, because even kids from abroad, because of Brexit rules. One time we were a more open society and we could bring in, you know, European kids, etc. We can't do that. Then our own kids have got opportunities elsewhere.
Yeah.
See if you go down to a huge club. I remember years ago, I would like to talk to Jim Duffy about this again, because Jim was very involved in it. But I remember going down to Chelsea many years ago, maybe even 10 years, and going to their training ground. There was like hundreds of these kids wandering about from countries all over the world, Peter.
Yeah.
All over the world. And, you know, some of them were on X amount a week and all this.
Never to be heard of again.
Never to be heard of again.
Islam
The percentages are tiny. It's something like, I think it's less than 1% who ever make it from academy level to established first team level.
If they make one out of it. If you get a...
Do we have a great success rate though? Do we have a great... I mean, I always get... And I accept your point. Your point is a very valid point, Alison, which a lot of fans will look at and say, you know, listen, the riches sometimes of going to England, it can transform you and you are set up for life, even over the space of a 3-year contract that can deliver a lot of money for you. But secondary to that, in a long-term career where you get into football as a kid because you love it, but you want to play it regularly, I look at Jake Hastie and I thought to myself, now there's a boy that's got something. Could he have developed by playing 150 games at Motherwell? The answer is yes. The exception to the rule and the success rates are a Billy Gilmore. Everybody knew Billy Gilmore was a great player at a young age. Can he make that step up? And the answer is, over a longer period, he then eventually gets to a situation where he gets regular football at Brighton, despite that kind of a spark that happened at Chelsea, and then it quickly diminished. So you're saying to yourself, have we got a good strike rate? You know, everybody's talking about David Watson at Kilmarnock now and Lennon Miller. These boys have still got to do it, Hugh. Yeah. They're on that early promise. They've still got their next move. And I think Lennon Miller has got a smart cookie, because he's got a dad there who's saying, by the way, hang fire, son. Stick in at Motherwell, get yourself 100 games, and if you've got that, you can make the step up. David Watson, thankfully, has got a Derek McInnes there to say to him, listen, play here, develop, you'll get your big move.
But it's all very well in saying that, but when it's actually tested, it's
absolutely
a different proposition, because it's such an uncertain landscape. You don't know what's going to happen. So if somebody comes in and says to Lennon Miller on the 30th of August, there's a 4-year contract worth 20 grand a week, it's a really hard decision to say, do you know what, let's have another season, play the full season. Although you can see the logic behind it and you can see the sense behind it, nobody knows what's going to happen. There could be a change of manager, you could fall out of favour, you could be an injury, you can do anything. The vagaries of life can happen, whereas here is a contract worth X amount of money, which is life-changing.
But have we got enough of them? And the answer to that for me, especially this year, and I think it's been, well, last season is the evidence of it, we were all sitting, looking and saying to ourselves, I wonder who's going to be in the running for the Young Player of the Year. Sparse, wasn't it? I mean, you were actually including, at one point Lennon Miller was included, he had 20 appearances and not all of them starts. And he was in the running for Young Player of the Year. And I was looking at him saying to myself, well, how many of you have actually gone and watched Motherwell, you know, and seen this boy regularly? They'd seen him on the telly produce a beautiful pass in a game against Celtic. But other than that, they weren't watching him regularly. But it was such a really small group of players to choose from that he was, in those 20 games, a standout. Whereas before you could have picked from, there was maybe 10 or 15 in the running, and you could maybe get a really strong. We were struggling last year, I think.
Absolutely struggling. And it's interesting with the Lennon Miller thing as well, because a lot of Lennon Miller, I've watched him live and I think he's a real talent, but I haven't watched him live for the 20 games. And I would love to watch him live for the 20 games, because then you would see what he still has to do. Then you could see. I mean, I'm thinking, and these 20 games isn't 20 performances, just coming on and sub and things like that. About the 20 games, I would venture to suggest that he's been very good in some and really not so good in others. And by the way, that's all right.
He's
a teenager.
Well, I watched him at Motherwell on a regular basis, and I would say of the 20 games, you know, I managed to see quite a few of them. And one of the things that I did see, and this is why I think it's a joy for guys like yourself and yourself, Alison, it is, I make a point of going and seeing lots of other teams other than Celtic and Rangers, and he would come on in a game, and he'd come on as a sub in one of the games at Fir Park and demanded the ball.
Yeah, I thought he was impactful. I thought he was a player who had an impact either from starting or from the bench, and I saw quite a bit of him last season as well. I think most games you came away and you could pinpoint something that he'd done in a game that was good, that was positive. And I know everyone talks about the Celtic game, just that the pass that's leading up to it. But I think that spoke of a confidence, not just of an ability, but there's a real assurance and confidence for a kid at 17 walking in to first team level. I think it augurs well for him. I don't think there's any question he's a huge talent. I think he'll go on and have a big future, regardless of whether that's at Motherwell or elsewhere in the longer picture. I think he's a fabulous player. But to answer your question of whether or not there's enough of them, I don't think there has been.
And Doak's a classic example as well. Celtic had offered a little teaser of a couple of games for him, hoping that he was going to stay longer. But again, Doak thinks, well, I'm going to go to Liverpool because they're in. He goes to Liverpool, picks up an injury, and suddenly
even
he's
before
now
he'd
about
picked,
to go on loan.
Even before he'd picked up the injury, though, he was featuring. If you think of those games,
I think he was featuring because Klopp had said, I like you, and I'm going to put you in certain games. But these are what I would call the top end, the small percentages of the stats that they're looking at in this report. It's really interesting, and I think it's well worthy of us giving it another 5 minutes or so. Is the fact that Real Sociedad, PSV, in the Champions League, clubs who had overachieved, they had 15 and 11 academy graduates respectively in their squad, so they're certainly investing in it. But if you look back down through the years, 50% of the Ajax squad that reached the semi-final of the Champions League 2019, 50% of them, and by the way, can I just say to you, by the time they'd reached the semi-final of the Champions League, by the time it got to the summer,
They were
they were all away.
They
They were all away.
It
But
was just about that. Yeah, of
but
course.
the investment in it is quite simply, if you invest in it, you get a lower wage bill. They're coming from the academy. If you invest in them and give them that chance to develop, if you make them better players, it's like Brendan Rodgers would say, he wants to try and make somebody a better player. Sir Alex Ferguson, you'll never win anything with kids. Well, he could see the talent in them, but he gave them that pathway.
Absolutely. It needs courage. You need courage as well as strategy. You need to say, I'm playing this 17-year-old kid in front of 60,000 fans in a game that you're going to win the league, and see if he plays badly, I'm going to suck it up and say, well, you're playing next week as well.
Yeah.
Because that's what you're going to do. I mean, I've watched over the years at Celtic and Rangers, over the years, the amount of next best big things you've seen, from your John Flecks to Ewan Henderson. I thought Ewan Henderson was a terrific talent at Celtic. I've watched all these. These are just two names, and then both have gone on to have good careers, by the way.
Yeah.
But not in Scotland, because for the reasons that or the excuses, because they've forensically looked at it. There doesn't seem to be the courage to play them.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, it's not just Scotland where there is a situation where you're looking and saying to yourself, there is a worry. I think you have to look at, Italian football in the last 10 years is not what we once recognised. There are no superstars and regular young players that have suddenly emerged. Juventus has been there and thereabouts, but the rest of the clubs have not been able to dominate the way they used to, and there's certainly not a greater amount of players that you look at.
And a lot of their major players now is very much like Scotland. A lot of their major players are foreign players. Napoli's league winning team. The best player was a Georgian in the team. They've got. Outside, Italy always had that, and they always looked at it as they were very tight on the 3-4 rule, as we remember.
Yes.
They just bought the best three Dutchmen and the best three Germans and put them into their team. But I was at Napoli Juventus last season, and seen a game live. Atmosphere terrific, a lot of quality on the pitch, but you weren't looking at it and saying these teams are going to knock it out the park in Europe, and that was Naples just after winning the championship, so they were just on the slide of it. But Italian football has certainly suffered, Peter. Certainly suffered.
Yeah, I look at it now, and I think we can highlight the problems. They're easy to highlight. You can look at it and say, well, has the structure, in place? Is it starting to bear fruit? Are we teaching them properly? Are they getting that pathway? Can they get into a team and play regularly? And then if they do, what is the success rate? And if it's not a huge success rate, and I'm looking at the 12 clubs in Scotland and thinking, well, if you look at the 12 Premier League clubs in Scotland now, how many of them are young Scottish players that you think, oh, they've got a chance? And then, of course, with every problem that we have, and this certainly raises a lot of questions, what are the solutions? Is it a scholarship? Is it an ability for the clubs to say, look, we're going to put a loan system in place that allows players that we think have got a chance to play regularly elsewhere without being called back at the drop of a hat, which is unfair to the club that's going to play them, and also stipulations which say you must play them or you're going to get a financial penalty. You can't have all these different caveats and penalties in the clause in the deal that suddenly puts managers under pressure to play someone.
One of the really interesting things, I've just looked at this briefly again, I've read the overview and I've read the recommendations, but I thought it was clever in the SFA report done by Andy Gold, of course. It was that they're saying to the clubs, listen, there's something in this for you as well, because player trading, because they went through PSV and Ajax and all this, and say, not only just producing players for the good of the game, which is a limited appeal for clubs. Yes. We've talked about this many times. This good of the game doesn't quite wash, but they say, you can improve your player trading. And one of the things, if you talk to people in Scottish football a lot, guys that have come in and got their nose bloodied by being in it, or guys that have been in it a long time, say, look at the player trading of clubs. I mean, look at how many big transfers out the Hearts have. I mean, a big transfer out to Hibs, Aberdeen. We saw slow little changing of that. Majovski's changed the model of that. I think Hearts, if they wanted to, for example, would change the model in Shanklin. But how many young players are they putting through and selling for big money? Yes, your Doigs, yes, your Hickeys, but they need to do more than that.
Yeah.
They need to have a player model where that they're selling in player trading. They can say, we have in the black player trading of, we can rely on 4 or 5 million every year coming in from that young centre half that were brought through,
Yeah.
or the midfielder that's coming in, a wee conveyor belt, and I thought that was an interesting point.
And the only other aspect of this that I would say, which is the spanner in the works, is how difficult is it to employ a manager, Alison, and get him to buy into your ethos?
It's not just your manager, it's your own supporters. So you imagine this summer, what we've heard all summer is Celtic aren't spending money, all this money in the bank, you're not spending money. If you to come out as a club and say, well, we don't need a new left back, we've got this fabulous prospect coming up, we think he's going to make his mark first team level, what would the reaction be? It would be unanimously, you're tight, you're not spending the money, you've got to go out, you've got to bring in someone who's seasoned, recognisable, big name. I think for homegrown players, particularly at Celtic and Rangers, I think there is more pressure on them to come into the team and stay into the team. They've got more to do to convince people that they've got to stay in. I think the pressure on them can be intense. I think they're under everyone at these clubs, at both clubs, is under a particular microscope, but all the more so, I think, if you're a homegrown player. And if you go back to James Forrest, has had a lot of love across the last couple of months for the impact that he had across the last few weeks of the season, but he's always had work to do in terms of convincing an element of the Celtic support that he's good enough. He could be the most decorated Celtic player of all time. Yet you wouldn't. Can you think of a James Forrest song from the Celtic fans? Like, he's had to work harder. Even Callum McGregor, when he first went into the team too, you've got to work to really convince people that you deserve to be there and that the club shouldn't be going out to spend money to bring someone in your position. So it's not just a manager that you need to buy into, it's the club as a whole that you need to sell it to.
Yeah, and of course the other thing about it is, when I look at Rangers, and I think, where's the next Barry Ferguson? Where's that?
Barry Ferguson's 20 odd years ago.
No,
Barry Ferguson came through 2000.
That's the problem. I'm looking and I'm thinking to myself, everybody knew Barry at a young age was such a special player. And of course, slowly but surely, it's a Dick Advocaat who buys into him and gives him that confidence to go and play.
He's competing in midfield with De Boers and things like that to get. I mean, you've got. That's exceptional. That's the 1 percentile, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think these players, and I think knowing Barry as we do as well, Barry's mentality would be, if you said to him at 13 about winning Rangers, he would say, I don't know why I'm not in the Rangers team at 13. Yeah. He would be genuinely shocked that he was in the Rangers team.
And the last crop
you need that as well.
And the last crop of really talented youngsters out with that, and I think a club that was lucky to get a really good batch was Hibs. You look at Hibs and you suddenly see...
You can get a cyclist like that, you have a cycle of it.
Kevin Thompson, Scott Brown.
Whittaker. Gary O'Connor, Riordan, our own Tam McManus, not forget about him.
Absolutely.
Dundee United had that wee spell, the Gold, Suter, Robertson, Mackay, Stevens and Armstrong.
Yeah.
That was a
even Robertson had gone up from Queen's Park.
Had spotted him there. So there is these wee clusters that come through. I mean, Celtic would say to you as well, they say, well, look at us, how bad are we? I mean, in the first team squad we've got Ralston, Welsh, McGregor, Forrest. That's 4 sort of squad players that have come through. So that saved them a lot of money in many ways. But I'm really interested in the findings that challenge what I held to be true and is obviously wrong. I'm really interested in that, and I'm really interested in and I'll read it in their breakdown of it, because they're not just saying things willy-nilly. They'll have evidence to back us up. One thing I'll say that perhaps is a wee tweak on it is that in Scotland you've got a really unusual situation. You've got this situation. It's not too unusual that you've got you know, you have over the years had 2 teams going for the league. So if you didn't win the league, it was a disaster. Ajax and PSV don't win the league every year. PSV are getting dominant. So it's not a disaster if they win the league. They can take that on board and they can say, we'll go next season. And Rangers will go, I've said that this season, and I think that'll be really interesting how that plays out, because Rangers, I'm not saying Rangers are not going to win the league, but Rangers have basically said, listen, this year's going to be challenging, and we do blah, 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 blah. And all that is great on strategy, saying we'll get a wage bill, we'll get players coming through. It's what a wonderful strategy it is. But see, when it hits the reality that Alison referred to earlier, of fans, that's the testing time.
Yeah, absolutely. You can give us your view on it. It's a very interesting read, and as Hugh mentioned there, the document, if you've got time, you know, on the SFA website. But over and above that, I think there's a genuine need to get your thoughts on young players. Would you like to see clubs persevere with young players? Would you be one of the critical fans that says, no, it's all about success, we're not willing to persevere with them? How vital do you think it is, and how heartwarming is it to see one of your own? You hear fans singing, he's one of our own, on countless occasions. Give us your thoughts. What do you think the solution is? It's a tough one. It won't just be one aspect that we want you to nail, but it's certainly good to hear your opinion on it here on the Journos in the section below on our YouTube channel. We'd love to hear what you think of not only the solution to getting more and more young players a chance to play regularly. Is it at the club they're at? Should there be a good co-op system, as they're calling it now, where they've got a chance to play elsewhere? And with that in mind, what about the success rates of the academy? Is it worthwhile spending all that money to try and get them through? We'd love to hear your thoughts on it. It is one of those topics that gets everybody going, and of course I'm almost certain there will be one of those messages saying, my son played for and this happened, my daughter played for this and there was no pathway, and you know, the nightmare stories. But there's got to be a solution, and we've got to try and find it before we eventually get to Think Tank 3. And on that point you just made there, of course, clubs invest in young players, they get a special group of players together that suddenly emerge and can deliver success. It could have been the ultimate for everybody if Ajax had won the Champions League. But you look for success in our country with a 12-team league. And I remember Stephen Robinson on this very couch saying to us, yeah, you're talking about me giving youngsters the chance to develop them and put them in the team, but 3 games, 3 defeats, people want me sacked. And suddenly we are in a culture, and it brings us nicely on to the next topic. We are in a culture where second is nowhere, and sometimes we also have a situation where, well, you haven't won a game in 5 or a game in 7, so you're not what we're looking for, so we're going to sack you. And you know, you only have to look at Jack Ross. Didn't get a chance to really implement his strategy. God, Neil Lennon lasts 6 games at Rapid Bucharest and he's bulleted. Managers now are living in a culture where you've got to come in and it's got to be a quick fix.
And managers now accept this, you know. I remember, I'm old enough to remember that a manager being sacked was a humiliation for the manager. You know, this is what he felt. I'm not talking about outside. They would go into a darkened room for 3 days and sackcloth and ashes and what they have, and wheat, salt, tears. Nowadays they go, that's just the business. I mean, you look at somebody like Pochettino. I mean, you think Pochettino's, you think he's in any great angst about getting sacked from various jobs. He's saying, nah, I'm a coach. That's what happens. Yeah. As long as they pay me off, I'll go on. I'm a coach for hire. I'll go. I know the game. I'll go somewhere else, and someday I'll go to somewhere and they'll sit me down. Mourinho.
That nice big bank balance would be a good cushion, though.
I always say, I talked to a Premier League manager about 5 years ago, an English guy. I will not say his name, and he was managing a good club in England, not maybe the very top good club. And I said, you're very, very relaxed about everything when he was talking to me about his future. I says, well, this is my future. This was the time. He said, I'm getting £1 million a year. He says, for this job. And he said, I've got 4 years to go. But they sack me tomorrow. That's £4 million.
It's a great way to look at it, isn't it? But
come on, that's me.
Any other jobs down there?
Next.
that's a cold-hearted way to look at it, and you have to look at it in a financial sense for yourself, for the security. But I look at someone like Neil, who really was itching to get back.
Yeah, there's a hunger to
There's a hunger to get back in and be a manager and truly deliver success. And, you know, for a number of Scottish clubs, they may well have looked at it and thought, well, he might be too expensive, or we don't want to take the baggage or whatever. He was desperately trying to get in off a CV that I thought stood up with the best of them. But then he has to go to Romania, where there's no attachment to Neil Lennon in his history, and he finds himself 5 draws and 1 defeat, and he's bulleted.
I think it's been a bit harsh on him. 2 best players sold. I think maybe what he was promised and what the reality was maybe quite different. We'll know. I'm sure we'll get him to have a chat about it over the next couple of days or so. But I think you'd have a bit of sympathy for him. I think, well, we know he was desperate to get back in. I think there's a real desire to coach. There's a love of coaching and enjoyment of the game. I think he'd definitely still have something to offer.
It's a really strange one. I feel for him, and I feel for other managers who, you know, want to get back in, have something to offer. But as you know, Hugh, in this day and age as well, because it's a business, there's less of a compassion, there's less of a link to money, there's less of a link and an understanding now. It's just quite simply, we're going to bullet you.
And the thing has changed, the dynamics has changed as well, because see, in the old days, if you had a poorly performing team, the first thing would be probably get rid of the players. First thing now is get rid of the manager, and also that was Mourinho at Chelsea and Tuchel at Chelsea, and even Lampard at Chelsea, just to use one club. As soon as the players don't fancy you,
You're out.
you say to yourself, well, for Mourinho, for example, do you say, would you pay him, say, 10 million to get rid of him? Or do you have to get rid of, you know, Jorginho, Hazard, and whoever else who don't fancy him, which is hundreds of millions? You say, I'll keep them and we'll bin the manager.
The power imbalance has completely shifted.
Aye,
Yes, absolutely. But then again, you reap what you sow, and for so long, clubs treated players like cattle, and other words that I could use, just basically to kill their careers if they didn't toe the party line.
Throw them into the reserves and let them stagnate.
But one of the things that really interests me, and I've read his book and all that, I would love to get Carlo Ancelotti in a room with a cup of tea and just say, how do you manage at Madrid? Because nobody's telling me that he's telling guys that if you don't come in, if you don't wear the trainers at if you don't come at this time, you'll stand in that shape, and if you don't move out that shape and stop the training session, right?
Yeah.
You know, but he's had to manage a different way, and that is
but I think
hugely
the better story for Ancelotti, for me, and I might be wrong for a number of people who want to criticise me, I think over the last 30 to 40 years, Ancelotti is the greatest manager in our history.
But he also comes across as so unflappable, utterly calm.
And managing not just in teams though, Pierre, that's the point, managing personalities. Can you imagine how difficult it is?
Big personalities.
Yeah, but the greater story surely is with players that played at Everton. And you ask them, what was it about him? Because he's got a skill in dealing with great players at Real Madrid. So that's fine. He's got a skill in dealing with great players at Chelsea and Bayern Munich where he won things. But what made him so special at an Everton? What was it about him?
I think what's so intriguing about him is how he manages people. Not how he manages players, but how he manages human behaviour and can get the best out of individuals and as a collective, to make a strong collective.
And the other thing, Ali, which is something which you obviously will smile at now because only Hugh and I realise it, is we are of that generation who actually remember him as a player. You know what I mean? And he was part of a team.
And the greatest club side in my view of all time.
It's a great. By the way, we should do that next week. Will we do that next week in the Journos, Hugh?
If you don't,
the greatest club
somebody else to argue about.
Yeah, and the other thing about it as well, of course, because I think it's Barcelona, you think it's AC Milan, somebody would say Ajax, somebody would argue Bayern Munich. You know, I'm talking about that domination. It's a great one for next week. We'll do that next week, Hugh. Well done. So with that in mind, Ancelotti would be great to find out what this special point is. And it goes back to that fact of, and even Ancelotti emptied at Real Madrid at one point. But it goes back to the point here where we are listening to, the manager Philippe Clement at Rangers, and he's in for the long term, and he's got a deal, and it's a 4-year deal now. It's been extended, and he is now trying to build something at Rangers, and he's buying into what the chairman says and John Bennett saying, listen, we can't keep going down this short-term look. We've got to look long-term. But as you mentioned, and as we're all fully aware, Philippe Clement finishes second to Celtic this season, and, suddenly the pressure's on him. I mean, Scott McDermott has made an interesting observation that, there needs to be things put in place, but, he still thinks Rangers can mount a title challenge this season. But right now, if you look at the whole thing in context of what's happening there, the results, you're saying to yourself, nobody's giving them a catch chance in hell.
I think Celtic look head and shoulders above anything else in a domestic sense so far. I think first impressions would be that Celtic are so far in front that there's no viable title race. I don't think it may prove to be otherwise as the season plays out, but initial evidence would be that this is a Celtic team that's picked up where they left off last season. I think the hangover from Ange and the discord and the ill feeling that resonated around the club around this time 12 months ago is evaporated. It evaporates on the back of a successful season. Everyone's brought in to Brendan Rodgers. You can sense a different atmosphere, I think, around the club. And I know there's been a narrative all summer about money and about not spending it, and it still rumbles. But I think when you compare it to where they were a year ago, I think the discord is quietened somewhat, and that comes from winning games. It always does. But where you saw Celtic, I think, stutter at points last season before becoming fairly fluid, you've just not seen that across the opening weeks. They've looked fairly well oiled, they look up to speed. Rangers, I think you just have a whole lot of noise around the club on and off the pitch. I think there are a lot of issues. I think Rangers fans, if you were to ask them if they believe whether or not they can go and challenge for the title, I think the vast majority of them would say they'd be there in hope rather than expectation. I don't think there's sufficient evidence to say that this is a team that can go and push and challenge Celtic. Financially, there are no resources now going out of the Champions League. There's not an ability to go into the transfer market between now and the end of the window until they offload players, and even then you're probably compromised by what you're bringing in. The same in January. I don't see a viable title race. I don't know where it's coming from. And the reality of that is that there has to be something else. You have to see some kind of success for people to stay buying into Philippe Clement and to buy into the long term and the strategy that's been discussed. There has to be something, whether that is success in the cup tournaments or whether it is a comprehensive improvement to things on the field. There has to be something. It can't just be, oh well, we're slipping up and we're dropping points at Tynecastle and we're coming away from Celtic Park because the noise gets unbearable. Then it gets too difficult.
The only problem is, Hugh, as Alison mentioned, Celtic were a stuttering side last season and still managed to get 93 points. They won the league by 8 points. I thought they would win it by 10 or more. I said at the start of the season when Rodgers came back, for all the manner in which he came back, lots of Celtic fans thought they were going to get an immediate spark from him. They certainly did. They certainly weren't happy with the overall football. It's taken a while for Brendan to get his mitts into the way he wants the team to play. Maybe taking him longer to get the type of players he wants in to play that specific football. But I agree with Alison. I can't see Rangers. I think they're weaker than they were last season. And I think, with the loss of the Champions League money, I don't see where they're going to duck and dive to bring in that type of player that suddenly suggests they can swing the 8 points and then suddenly suggest they can win the title. I don't see it coming. The only thing that's in their favour is if Celtic, in this remaining 9, 10, 11 days of the transfer window, suddenly just decide, listen, we're just going to take our chances on domestic football, do enough just to win the league, and we'll suffer the wrath of the criticism that's coming in Europe.
I don't think they'll do it. They might get no players in, but I don't think they'll do it because of the reasons you say. I don't think they're going to say, we'll just settle for it. I think there's a real impetus within the club, a dramatic impetus within the club certainly from the manager, who is the most powerful man in many ways within the club, to get players in. I think there's a real impetus in the board to get players in. Whether they will or they won't, I think they will get a couple in. But I don't think it'll be down to we don't want to spend the money, or we don't want. I think they're desperate to spend the money. And I think the IDA move proved that. They spent on IDA. We can talk all day about, what he's worth and all that, but they went to the limits with IDA. They said to us, "No, money is not going to be the object. $9.5 million for a guy you could go up for $4 million at Christmas. They're wanting it." The interesting thing about Celtic was I watched them on Sunday, Peter. I was at the game on Sunday, and it was the first time I'd watched them live this season, and the first time I'd watched them live since maybe the middle of last season. And I could say categorically that Celtic are a better team this season than they were last season. Now, people say, but they've not changed anything. What I mean is the players. The system is better. It's slicker. I think the goalie is an upgrade. The goalie's better. I mean, this sounds, people will be heresy. The goalie's simply better with the ball. He made one pass on Sunday where normally a goalkeeper would have gone out wide with it. He made a direct 30-yard pass straight through the middle and set up a move. So they're better at that. Celtic's problem is going to be, this season, it'll be optics and politics and fans. That's the big problem. Because they've got, 11 days left to, we now hear that, I think Matt Riley's gone. Rumours over Hatate. And now this fresh one over Kyogo Furuhashi, right?
Who has a new agent.
Who, shall we say, Brendan hasn't been too effusive over the last season and a half. He said the right things at times and other things. So, if he's talking about improving the squad, before he moves on any of those three, you think you'd have to have players in. Because he's generally got, apart from the goalkeeper, he's got the same squad. We know we got Ida and Bernardo in full time, but he's got the same squad as he had last season. So already, before any of them leave, you think you'd have to go 2-3. So that, inside there at the moment must be mayhem.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other question, you've already said, do we think Rangers can win the title? The answer is no. Are they better than they were last season? I don't think they are. Does anybody want to argue that point? No. So you've then said, okay, Celtic, they look better. They're certainly playing better football. The other part of the equation, which we all have to analyse in this situation, and again, it comes down to what we're talking about Philippe, Clement. His undoing last season was losing games to teams that Rangers fans just couldn't tolerate. And I'm wondering about the strength of other teams. Have they got better? Hearts last season, you're in a situation where you're saying to yourself, well, they won 20 games. They lost 10 games and then the others were draws of their season. They finished third. Are they better this season? Is the standard going to be better? Is Dundee United going to offer anything? Can a better Aberdeen, a Kilmarnock, can we get a better Hibs? Will they be able to make the league better? Are they stronger?
I think the only interesting one for me, I think Hearts will be, I know Hearts are going through turbulence at the moment, but I think Hearts will be fine. They've got a good bedrock there, they've got a very strong squad. I think they'll be fine. I think Aberdeen's an interesting one. I think, because they look as if they want to spend a bit of that $6 million they got for Majowski. They've got a very fascinating manager. A manager I'd really love to succeed because it's, he's bringing someone fresh outside. He's wanting to play. So, and I think Dundee will be better because I think Dundee made a really good buying Simon Murray. I think he, with Curtis Main up front, I think Tony Docherty's done a terrific job there with his resources. I think he's really proved himself, moved out from being a number 2. The rest of the clubs, I think, are really struggling just to stand still because of cash. Can Stephen Robinson do it again? Does he just keep getting them into the top 6 when you don't think about it?
And can they keep him? Somebody loses their job, he's going to be linked with a move elsewhere because of the job he's done at St Mirren, and then
Kelly, I think, will be fine because we've got a really good manager, and the manager's getting backed. I think all their stutter at the beginning of the season is because of
Europe
the two games a week
Yeah.
thing.
It's going to be interesting. Give us your view on Celtic and Rangers, the race for the title. Will it be a 2-horse race? Is it a 1-horse race? I mean, we're talking about it. There's only been 2 games played. But as you get towards the end of that transfer window, as Hugh mentioned, fans are driven by the optics of how they view a team in evidence of last season, and that evidence taken forward to this season. Are they stronger? Are they weaker? Are they likely to mount a challenge? Does it matter that you've signed an extension to your contract? Will you be given that time? Is it not worth the paper it's written on? That's certainly the dilemma for Philippe Clement. What can he do? Will he be given the time to do that? And with every defeat that a manager suffers, does it alter your viewpoint on whether they're the real deal or not? These are all the questions we've got to ask, and we'd love to hear what your thoughts on it are. And you can do that by quite simply, if you get the chance, in the comments section on our YouTube channel. You can indeed, if you download the PLZ Soccer app, it's fairly straightforward. Download the app, and in the main menu right at the bottom is contact, and in there you can record a video, and we'll certainly play out some of your messages. All you need to do is record it. It'll drop into us, alert us to the fact that you've recorded a video. Give us your viewpoint on the race for the title on your team. Are you better than last season in your mind? You might want to comment on the managers. There's a great sack race that sadly happens, as Neil Lennon has found out, but in Scottish football, usually by the time you get to November and December, chairman and chief executives and owners get...
November's late.
Yeah. We've got 2 away already.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
Jim McIntyre's away and Ian Murray's away already.
Yeah. So you give us your thoughts on that. Just before we finish, we always like to do a top 10. We don't really. I just say that because I know it pisses Ali off. But that's what we're here for. Yeah, that's what we're here for. We're here for top 10s. That's what makes us. I mean, it's the only thing that I
annoy Alison.
Yes, and the other thing about it.
I think it was one. As a 12 years, I think it was one of the first charter statements we came up with.
How can we annoy her?
You're breathing.
The other thing, exactly, and the other thing, thank you for that, Ali. And the other thing about it is quite simple. I don't know you. I love top 10s. Do you not?
I like a good top 10. I think maybe it's a nerdy man thing.
It's a really male thing.
Is it? Do you think so?
Oh my God, it's such a male thing. Is it? Yes.
I mean, honestly,
top 10s, top 5s.
To be fair, I absolutely put the call out to women out there. Do you like a top 5, a list, or a top 10? I mean, honestly, I absolutely thrive on it.
For women, though, it's a top 10 is first in the top 5 of things they hate.
Yes, exactly. Well, listen, I think I disagree with Ali as I do on a regular basis. I think that we can't split that with gender on this one. But I'm going to give you what I think just off the back of something that I watched on Monday night. I watched Jamie Vardy when he was getting substituted. Now, Jamie Vardy is not my cup of tea as far as maybe stories in the background. He's not the player that I like, on the basis of Ranieri and how he was treated and how that Leicester side down tools the season after with regards to Ranieri and how it wasn't working out for a man who delivered them the ultimate title. But I do like Jamie Vardy on one thing, which is he likes a noise up. And I loved a noise up, Ali, playing football. I
Can't
love
imagine the noise.
Absolutely, I love picking a fight. So, quite simply, Vardy...
How's that working out?
It's not worked out too well, but listen, the joy of it all is, as Hugh will tell you, when people suffer from addictions, quite simply, you just have to do it. It's simple. I don't mind. When eventually I leave this earth, I hope somebody says at my eulogy, he loved a fight, which resulted in why he's in the coffin in the first place. Vardy points to the Premier League that they've won to the Tottenham fans. And I thought it was magnificent. Great noise up. And it just opened up in my mind the top 10 great noise ups from players and celebrations that we have. As a kid, I thought there was one that I thought was very brave, and I ended up sitting with him for 8 years at Radio Clyde, where we laughed heartily on a daily basis, was Derek Johnston, who scored the goal at Celtic Park, and the Celtic fans were giving him pelters non-stop, and he scored the goal at Celtic Park, and ran right over to the jungle and just basically did this motion to the Celtic fans where I thought, now that takes a bit of bottle. And I thought DJ laughed, the two of us couldn't stop laughing when I used to say to him, what was going through your mind? He said, oh, they've been giving me pelters, Peter, and I thought, I'll just go over and give it you all a bunch of, and I thought, well, roll on.
Cancelled now.
Yes, well, I think you can still do that. I mean, I think you can still do it. It's a great noise up. Scott Brown with another classic.
Yeah, but Diouf, Alhaji Diouf.
Yeah.
Adebayor at Man City, when he was there.
Adebayor was one
classic.
of the... It was the long run.
It was classic. I mean, he did it for 100 yards, which is... Here's the one that I think...
Particular level of fitness.
Here's one that I think was one of the most memorable ones was Jimmy Bullard for Hull City. When he scores the goal.
Sat them off.
Sits all the players down and goes like that. The manager is looking on at this, just celebrating and going,
how do I react?
How do I react? They are taking the proverbial out of me. But I thought that was brilliant.
I'll tell you another one which I really, really enjoyed, and I was lucky enough to be there. Liverpool were playing Everton in an FA Cup match, and it actually... The game had fallen on the same week that Steven Gerrard had got himself in trouble, in a situation in a bar. Now, the ultimate thing was nobody knew what was going to happen in the outcome of this legal case or investigation, but the Everton fans had already decided, so they said, you're getting jailed in the morning. So they were giving him pelters. And Hugh, the fantastic thing was Everton had taken the lead in the cup tie, and I watched Steven Gerrard at Anfield literally boss the game. He moved on to another level where basically single-handedly, I've never seen a player just grab the team and push them on, and then he scores the goal that equalises. Well, it was in true Adebayor fashion. From the Anfield top end, he ran up to the Everton fans and he just his back and lifted his shirt as if to say, there you are. And I thought to myself, at that point, I looked at Gerrard and I thought, that's my type of player for a noise up.
Souness and Brian McClare, shows your medals.
Yes. Yep, Graham Souness was a classic for it. Great noise up. I'll give you some others. Gary Neville against Liverpool.
He ended up getting heavily fined for that.
Yeah, he did actually. When he just ran over to them and gave it the gesticulating towards him. I give you Tam McManus against Dundee United after
the pole dance.
He decided to dance down the pole, as Eric Cantona did when he scored the penalty in his first game back.
Yep. I love players doing that because, see, like my pet hates and my top 5 pet hates in football. But one of them is the way fans get appalled when players go back.
Barrel clutching.
You hear fans. I mean, this like vile language, the kind of language that just pollutes your ears towards a player. And a player will turn right after scoring a goal like that. I'm like, oh my God, that was his ear to me.
I know.
What?
Yeah.
So I love a vindicated player. I love a player getting slaughtered and then doing something.
Yeah, Robbo used to do that at Hibs, and then eventually Hibs fans just decided, I don't think it's a good idea because this boys just keep scoring 27 goals in a derby.
Hibs fans having a go at Robbo is not the way forward.
Ayo Berkovic, remember Ayo Berkovic scoring, I think it was against Kilmarnock, and then giving the Celtic fans a victory.
Yeah, well, his own fans. Yeah, absolutely. Ayo Berkovic was an unusual boy to interview, I have to tell you. He was one of those guys that he would give you so much great copy, it was unbelievable. But by the way, when you look at players who do it, it's absolutely fantastic. I love it, and you're right, Hugh. Any fan who suddenly gets this level of this is a disgrace.
Where's the steward?
Yeah.
Get a policeman.
Yeah, I love it. Do you love it? If you can, why not text in 10 in your list that we can then read out to Alison, because I know in my top 5 of how can I pick a fight and noise people up, Ali's up there. She's in at number 2 or the 3.
I know who's I'm number 1.
It's a few ahead of you, but never mind. Anyway, I like top 10s and top 5s. Give us your top 10 of great noise ups from players from games. I think actually one of them that I remember, which it would get him the jail now, was in the 70s. I think the Tottenham fans were giving Sammy Nelson what for, and he just ran over to them and dropped his shorts and started scalping his backside. Takes a bit of bottle to do that, but maybe not the thing to do nowadays because you'd be under arrest. Yes, and you'd be on a register. But nevertheless, I'm not going to say great days the 70s. It wasn't necessarily. But nevertheless, there's one from your top 10. Give us your list. Don't forget, get on the app, download the app, and you'll get all the breaking news at your fingertips. You also, on the PLZ television section, you get all the managers and players' interviews from north and south of the border as well. So, well worth downloading the app. I do hope you enjoy the programme. Thank you for your support. Hit the subscribe button on PLZ Soccer's YouTube channel. It will help us get bigger and better, and challenge some of the old established broadcasters, because we are really making a fight of it with your support. So today I hope you enjoyed the Journos. I hope you enjoyed watching it and listening. Thank you to Alison, thank you to Hugh, and from myself, Peter Martin. Don't forget, hit the subscribe button. Thank you for watching and listening.